My role at the Financial Planning Institute of Southern Africa is Head of Policy and Engagement. And one of the many hats I wear is running our financial education program called FPI, My Money 123. So again, I think what I'm seeing here, we've got people who are really passionate about financial education and making sure that people can be better educated to make better financial decisions, which is what Money Smart Week is all about. So I think we've got the right people on the screen. So with that round of introductions, we now are going to kick into the meat of our discussion. So particularly in our session, we're going to be viewing it from a lens of savings and investments and really looking at, you may have had a plan, you may have been in a particular situation, and COVID has brought about some change. So what is the view and what are you going to do from here on in? But I think the first point that we've got to look at is people talk about savings and investments, and quite often they're used interchangeably. But there is a difference between saving and investments. So, Kirsty, I'm going to kick off the discussion with you. Just give us a brief introduction to what savings is, and then we'll move on to ask somebody else to describe what investments are.
Absolutely. David, those words, as you say, are constantly being used interchangeably. But what a lot of people will find is if they meet with a certified financial planner and actually go through the full financial planning process, they'll really get to understand how we use savings on the one hand and we use investments on the other hand. And savings tend to be more for the shorter term investment. So I would say what I do with my clients is ensure that they have some money set aside in a savings, just like an ordinary savings account, like a money market account, which is there for emergencies. So if something goes wrong, if COVID happens, that sort of thing, there is money accessible to them in a short-term investment vehicle, which doesn't fluctuate a lot. It doesn't go up and down in value a lot. It just kind of consistently goes up. And that is really highly accessible money, as opposed to an investment, which is going to be a longer-term investment. I'm not going to go into that. But so it's very much for the shorter-term investment that you would have. Maybe it's a couple of months, maybe it's a year or two, but something that you might need to access in the next few months, or maybe it's something that you're saving for that you specifically will need, for example, within the next year. That's a savings account.
Brilliant. And I think you raise an important point, which we'll touch on a bit, and this is about an emergency fund. Naomi, I'm going to go to you and say, can you speak to us a little bit about an investment and how that differs from savings?
Sure. So I think something that I found really useful was to go back to the definition of the word investing. And so what investing really means, it's to put money, time or effort into something with the expectation of gaining a profit. And so, what an investment account does is that it actually lets your money grow. And the way that it does that, there's various assets that your money can be invested in, but it's really got to do with the function of time and the return that you can earn over a significant period of time. And so to contrast it to saving, where you might just be accumulating capital, say if you save 1,000 Rand a month, you expect to have, say, 12,000 Rand by the end of the year. Investing allows you to actually grow that money over a period of time.
Priya, if I can jump on you and say what I'm hearing as well from an investment viewpoint, there's looking for significant growth, but as we know, with growth comes a bit of risk. Can you explain to us a little bit about the trade-off in risk and reward?
Sure. So I think I'll take a bit of a foundational view first and say that when you think about most of us, our income is what allows us to, to have revenue and afford our expenses and our future goals. And that income is a reflection of the effort we put in. So we usually work self-employed or with an employer, and then the act of saving is diverting some of that money towards a future goal or a future accumulation like emergency savings that you'd need. The act of investing is trying to replace some of the effort that you would manually have to put in to earn. So you're getting your money to work for you. So when we start talking about risk and reward, it really is about understanding what the purpose of that investment is, so what you're hoping that investment will achieve for you and how you need your money to work for you. The longer you have and the more you feel you're able to invest in asset classes that have a probability of giving you higher returns, the more you would have to have an appetite for risk. So that's the relationship between risk and reward. And I think most of us understand the concept of if you put money away into a bank, you would likely earn interest, which is absolutely, growing your money. But the risk is so low that the reward is equal to that, and you can expect a lower risk but lower reward. And conversely, when you're prepared to take more risk for bigger goals or longer time periods, you can expect more likely a higher reward.
Thank you for that. And one of the ways I explain that too, if I go to my wife and I say, look, honey, next year I'm going to take you to Paris for a trip, but I put it in an investment which goes up and down and very volatile and might lose money. Yeah, I don't want to go to her 5 days before our planned trip and say we're going to Paris instead of Paris. She might not be happy with that. So the savings, we're saying a little bit more secure, a little bit more flat, not so much growth, but a little bit more security than an investment for the long term. Gerald, I noticed you when Kirsty was talking, particularly around the emergency fund, and saying, yeah, that's one of the good examples of a savings fund, because that you want accessible if something happens like COVID. Do you want to cover off on the emergency fund a little bit for us?
Okay, now the emergency fund comes in when you start talking the levels of financial independence. Now, I know everybody loves the word investment. You put in money, it invests over time, and it returns to you. Nice, lack of words. But you can't even think about investing if you haven't covered the basics, which is really around having a savings mattress. So if you're looking at your financial independence, your savings is your bed. You need a mattress before you start thinking of fancy sheets and pillows, etc. We need to start realizing that the emergency fund allows you to live. And an emergency fund, typically from a financial planning point of view, is 6 months' salary saved up. So if you are starting your journey of accumulating or building wealth, you first need to have that emergency money because it covers financial shocks. A financial shock can be a death in the family. A financial shock can be you losing your job. And it basically gives you a bit of time to recover and find your feet again. Once you've built your emergency savings, you're then in a position where you can take some risk. Risk being, I can put in money and give it time to return back to me without worrying that I won't have food to eat. And a lot of the time, we're finding people going the other way around, where they're heavily invested in what you are determining as volatile. They go up and down in price, assets, when they actually don't have any emergency savings. So prudent financial planning says, let's not even talk investing until we've built and accumulated an emergency fund, because that will ensure that no matter what happens, you're okay. Therefore, you can learn, you can accept any risk which may come with the investments you then choose.
Thanks, Gerald. Francois, anything nugget of wisdom that you'd like to add to that discussion?
Well, the first nugget of wisdom is there's nothing wrong with Paris. I'm not sure why you're knocking Paris. It's a beautiful place.
But compared to Paris, a little bit of a problem.
True. I think the benefit of having children is that you have to try and kind of explain concepts and things to them. And in explaining, you also get a lot of clarity in your own understanding. And when I kind of chatted to my kids about, investments and savings and all the rest of it, one of the things that I was sort of explaining to them is you're going to find, and this depressed them quite significantly, which wasn't my intention. One of the things you're going to do is you're going to work for the next 40 years. You're going to be grinding for the next 40 years, earning money or earning an income. You can't consume or use up all of that income for 40 years because you're going to get to that point where you're going to retire. And chances are you're going to live another 40, 50 years after that with no income. And I mean, a lot of research says that the person that's going to turn 200 has already been born. So let's just assume you retire at 80 and you end up living to the ripe old age of 200, but you're not earning an income over that period. So whatever you do with those 40 years of getting money in, you need to make sure that that money, you can put away some of it, so you're not consuming all of it. You can put away some of it to be able to pay yourself for those 40 years that you're still going to live after you're retired. So they are terribly depressed at the moment, and I'm hoping that they're going to put me into a nice old age home one day. Thanks.
That's always a good point. So I'm going to summarize some of the things that I'm hearing here. Is it starts with your earning potential. So it starts with your earning. It moves on then to deciding how best to allocate that earning. So you got to live today. There's no doubt about that. But you can't live everything today and not worry about tomorrow. So you got to live today. You got to plan for your tomorrow. And it's finding that balance of, how can I enjoy my life now, but make sure that I'm not going to be a burden on others or not have a good life when I retire. And part of that planning is looking at the short term, less volatile investments, something that is easily accessible for the short term, such as things like an emergency fund. And then from an investment viewpoint, I'm looking at a longer term time horizon, potentially taking a bit more risk because I've got time on my side that if there is a bad event, if there's a bad event when you're saving for 12 months, you've only got a very short time to recover. But if you're saving or investing for 40 years, you've got a long time to recover if there's something like 2020 happens. So I think that's a fair summary of what everyone said, and some really good points there about using your earning potential to plan what your tomorrow would look like. Now, like I was saying, 2020 is been a really rough year, and it doesn't look like 2021 is going to be a lot better. In fact, I saw a nice meme which said, March 2021 looks similar to March 2020, except now we've got toilet paper. So at least there's no toilet paper shortage. But again, we need to be careful for that. We are coming out of the lockdowns. We are coming into an environment where we're getting vaccines, where things are starting to look up, but we still need to be careful. And so what I'm looking at is, what are some of the things we've probably noticed from the clients' behavior and things in the last year, and how did they react to some of the things? And Naomi, I'm going to start with you, just to say, have you seen any feedback in terms of some of the concerns and worries that clients have been bringing up and running forward? Thanks.
Sure. I think from an investment perspective, there's probably kind of three broad areas that I would categorize it into. The first one would be investors that are exposed to the markets. And so what they've seen, so they're already investors, they're invested, and what they're seeing is volatility. And so they're seeing the value of their portfolio fluctuate up and down. And these investors, some of them have been panicked by this, and often it makes one wonder what you should be doing, taking an action. But I guess history has shown us that, the most successful investor is one who can look through the volatility and be able to stay invested. So that's the first one, is investors who are exposed to the markets and they're seeing that volatility come through in their portfolios. The second one, I guess, has to do with investors who've had their income impacted. COVID affected a lot of us in different ways. And so here you might have people whose circumstances have changed. And so they might have had to revisit some of the actions they're taking towards their investments. So for example, it's finding out whether you can change the amount of money you're contributing to your retirement annuity, or you might have to change the amount of income you're drawing from a particular investment portfolio, like a living annuity. And then the third one would be potentially new investors or people that are invested and were fortunate enough not to have a lot of impact and they still have some capital to invest. Our spending habits changed. Maybe you have savings that you typically would not have had. And there the question has been, is this a good time to invest? And really my response would be that, if you're going to pick an investment manager that you trust, really where you have the capital and the time available to do so, it is always a good question to ask that you should be investing, because the more time you have, the better you have. So in my view, it's basically always a good time to invest.
So Kirsty, I hear that Yeah, there may have been some positives, such as people working from home and not having to throw in large tanks of petrol because they're not traveling so much. What are some of the things from a financial planning perspective you've picked up in the markets and clients or consumers talking about?
Well, I think, if we go back about a year to March last year, March, April, when when we were put down into lockdown, it was at that stage, I think right in the beginning, there wasn't as much concern. But within about a month or so, we did see clients sort of saying, what should I be doing? Fortunately for me, as an investment specialist, and I think this certainly happens with most clients who've gone through worked through a certified financial planner, because that person would have really done some training with their clients. Almost, I want to call it training, that we try and train our clients to understand that investing is a long-term thing. So when there are corrections in the market, you need to just sit tight. You fuss bait, okay? Because that would be the worst time to suddenly be pulling your money out. So we were very fortunate that we didn't have clients who came and pulled their money out, but where we did see, and I think Nomi really hit the nail on the head earlier with what she said in her 3 points, because we had a number of clients who had to say to us, you know what, my business is closed, my salary has stopped, or my salary's been halved, what can I do? And fortunately, a number of the companies, like the life assurance companies, were actually very kind, and they allowed people to have a bit of a break in premiums or a reduction in premiums, which I found to be quite useful for people. And they maybe for it was about 6 months or so where they were able to reduce their premiums, and that certainly did help for a number of people. So yes, it was a case of the best thing to do if you're an investment client, to just sit it out. And let's face it, those clients who sat it out, their money dropped, but it's gone way up again. It's gone back higher than it was, kind of the same sort of time in March last year. And then for those others who reduced their premiums, they should have by now gone back to paying the premiums that they were paying, so as to not have any penalty on their policies that they had. Then on the other hand, the thing is to look at and this is where I see it's quite important, is to use some of the new generation companies when it comes to investing, because one can change your premium around. You can increase it, you can decrease it, you can do all that sort of thing without having penalties, as opposed to, unfortunately, some of the life assurance companies don't allow that sort of thing. But so the new generation companies are actually quite good in that you can really chop and change your premium as it suits your lifestyle.
I think that goes back to the opening quote from Dwight Eisenhower, that plans are useless, but planning is everything. So looking at the various scenarios and trying to have some foresight into making it flexible enough. Priya, would you like to come in and any additional trends or comments you might have seen?
Sure. So I think the first thing was it was really encouraging to see quite a number of savvy investors and savvy financial advisors taking advantage of the opportunity as well. Because as we spoke of, if you have an investment opportunity that aligns to the market conditions, it would be the right time to actually get into the market. Obviously, with the right kind of support and financial plan in place. But for most South Africans, what we found was that more than half of regular South Africans were withdrawing from their emergency savings or their short-term savings investment vehicles, savings vehicles. And also a number of clients were withdrawing from long-term policies, so policies and investments that they had planned to keep for the longer term. That number was not as significant as the more than half. It was about 23% or so. What that highlights for me is that those were people who had savings or investments to withdraw from. And so the lesson for us all is that when there is a crisis or of the scale or even something lesser, it is really important that you have taken the time to put money aside for savings and for investments, because unfortunately there were a number of people that didn't have that type of option available and had to drastically limit their expenses, remove expenses from their lifestyle, and contract the kind of lifestyle they were living. So that for me is quite a reinforcing lesson for us.
Gerald, again, I see you nodding again, so I'm going to bring you in on this conversation, and then Francois, I'm going to flip it a bit on the head. So just to give you some time to prepare, that we've done a lot for the consumer, but the industry has actually also helped financial advisors, and I'd like to bring you in around that sort of discussion. So, Gerald, what are some of the conversations you've seen happening and discussions you've been having around these times?
I think, there's different types of consumers, but the one thing across the board is we've all remembered we're all going to die. One of the conversations we never have is around death. And COVID-19 has reminded all of us that each and every one of us can die. And the same illness is affecting both wealthy and middle class as well as low earning South Africans. And I've seen a lot of people start to look at things like wills. I've seen a lot of people start to review their life cover, because a life policy is simply a replacement of income policy. If I die, how is my family going to survive with what I used to bring home? And that's part of the calculation of how much you can actually cover yourself, because it's based on your income. So I think we've gone back to basics. We've remembered we're all mortals. We've now started to remember as well that in the event of me going, what's going to happen? There's been a lot of interest in people starting to review wills. A lot of people have taken up life policies because they're starting to realize that it's an essential, because we all know probably now someone who died of COVID and the situation of family after, if they were covered in terms of risk or not, the risk of death. And even at the low income segments, the funeral policy has become a critical tool in terms of people managing the death, in terms of it can come up on everyone. So the one sobering fact of 2020 is that we've suddenly remembered we're mortals again. The one thing we're definitely assured of is death. And a lot of people are starting to openly discuss death again, which is something which hadn't happened for a while. We had almost started thinking we're invincible. And then this little virus you can't see has changed everyone's life and turned things upside down.
And we're going to get into the discussion around financial advice and how that can have changed during these times. And anecdotally, as part of the Financial Planning Standards Board community, I've been speaking to planners and advisors around the world, and anecdotally it turns on there's a shift from advice being considered purely about financial products. I mean, those are still there and those are still very important in the advice process. But the discussions around the advice angle of something like a will, like what would happen to me if I die, has been happening. And then the product solution has been coming in on top of that conversation. But Francois, what I want to get to you now to is, sometimes we might forget that financial advisors are also humans. They've also gone through this together. So what sort of work has the industry been doing, not only to support consumers? As we've heard, there was some premium holidays. We've heard on some other sessions around Money Smart Week, that the banks offered some breaks on the loans. Yes, you have to pay them somewhere down the line. But what has the industry been doing to support a vital cog, the financial advisor?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you very much. I think there are two areas I wanted to focus on. The first was, what is the industry doing to support brand SA? And then secondly, what is the industry doing to support financial planning businesses? And I think you get a little bit of a sense of what South Africans are thinking around the braai, because that's when people complain and where their kind of concerns really come to the fore. And I think within the industry, we've certainly been feeling that people have been very pessimistic about the turnaround in the South African economy. And people have been asking questions, around, is the economy going to get out of this recession? When are we going to start seeing some growth happening in the economy? Is it doom and gloom going forward? Who do we blame? Do we blame private sector, for ripping us off? Do we blame government for ripping us off? So there's been a lot of that narrative that's been bouncing around. And I think over the last year in particular, there's been a very, very good kind of concerted effort between public sector and private sector to be able to get together to say, we in this boat together, how do we physically focus on turning around the economy? And there've been a huge number of really, really good initiatives that have delivered a lot of positive kind of effects into the economy around public-private partnerships. So just one example is Business for South Africa is a kind of an aggregate of businesses within financial services as well as other sectors that got together with government to say, you know, what are the burning issues and how do we put together very specific things to address those issues? So if we talk, for example, about skills deficits within municipalities in terms of service delivery, as an industry, we were able to kind of put together people that understand, I think they're called old hands or silverbacks, kind of got some of those skills, put them into municipalities through a program called the Technical Assistance and Mentorship Development Program. And we're physically helping, private sector is physically helping municipalities to kind of transfer skills and to assist them to turn things around from a service delivery point of view. So there are a host of other, and we don't have time to go into all of it, there are a host of other programs like this that are aimed at turning around the economy. And I'm certainly very optimistic that we're about to see that daylight break, and we're about to see a lot of the dividends, positive dividends kind of flowing on the back of the public-private partnership work that we've been doing. If we go back to the original question that you asked me about financial planners, financial planning businesses like the ones that Gerald and Kirsten are kind of responsible for are effectively small businesses. And along with all the other small businesses in South Africa last year, I think there was quite a bit of pressure put on financial planning businesses in particular. And what we've been doing as an industry is we've been looking at how we were able to support these financial planning businesses. And we've spent a lot of time over the last year helping them, for example, to understand how to work on your business to make sure you've got a sustainable, resilient business while you're also working in your business. So you're doing the right financial planning things, you're kind of looking at a client-centric approach, but you also need to look at how do you put together systems and processes to make sure that your business is firing on all cylinders. We have been able to, and we've been able to sort of assist financial planning businesses by accessing grants, allowing them a little bit of leeway to help them, get through the couple of lean months that we've been through. So we've got some grants that we've put together as an industry. We've got some debt and investments that we've been able to put together as an industry that we've been able to flow through to financial planning practices. And I mean, at the moment, we've got over the last 5 or 6 years within ASISA, we've been able to support about 700 odd businesses, and about 400 of them are financial planning businesses. So we haven't just started focusing on financial planning businesses as a result of COVID. As an industry, we've been focusing on this for the last while, but specifically for the last 5 or 7 years. And some of that is around transforming the industry. Some of that is around making sure that the businesses that operate within the industry are sustainable businesses that are going to take us through, into the next generation.
Thank you for that, Francois. And Kirsty, I'm going to get to you I see come on that. So what I'm hearing from this is one of the positive things about this is there are new partnerships or existing partnerships are being highlighting. It's people coming together to work together to look for a better outcome. And yes, there is light at the end of the tunnel, and that light is not the train coming to hit us. It is actually the daylight that's starting to pop out. I think there are some good things that are happening when we can come together and we're stronger together. And that leads us into another discussion point. And Kirsty, I'll allow you to respond, but let's just think about that. I think the role of the financial advisor in this time has also changed. So like I said, the role has gone more from let's get together, perform a transaction, sell a product, to let's really look at you as a person, provide you some advice, and then put a product solution on top of that advice. So Kirsty, I'll allow you to respond, and then maybe if you've got so many nuggets on that point.
Thanks, David. I can certainly do that. But I was just listening to Francois, and I'm just loving the optimism that we're hearing there. And I think it is our responsibility in the financial planning profession to be actually encouraging our clients to be actually putting across that positive message that there is positivity out there and it isn't all doom and gloom. And in fact, if we look at what the markets have done, if we look at just the last quarter of last year, internationally, it was one of the top quartiles in the past 10 years, in the past decade that we've actually seen. So we saw some fantastic returns. I certainly know our clients have had some really good returns on their investments over the past year, which is the opposite to what we would have thought, because we saw such an incredible market correction that took place at the end of March. But in fact, a year later, it's actually very positive. So I think what's important, just to finish off on that question that you had there, David, is for us to remember it's not about timing the market. It is about time in the market. And that is what's so important. So getting to your next question, which is really about where can a financial planner actually help clients in this. I think what's important, and that a lot of clients will find, if they have met with somebody like a certified financial planner or a professional member of the Financial Planning Institute, what they will find is that those people will help them go through all the questions in life as far as their financial planning goes. If you meet with a CFP professional, they're going to ask you a whole lot of questions, and you're probably going to sit there and think, why on earth is he or she asking me all these questions about my family and how long did my grandparents live and all those sorts of questions. But the reason why is because they are trained to understand every bit about you, every bit about your longevity, every bit about your attitude to financial planning, to your attitude to your life, to understanding your families. They need to be able to understand all of that so that they can actually give you advice, and so that when there are times in the market, when there are major corrections, that you don't make any hasty decisions, and that you're able to actually be pretty level-headed about what it is that you're doing. And by asking you all these questions, they're also able to understand and direct you for you to be able to understand fully what your goals are as far as financial planning goes, because it's very important that you have goals so that you do all your normal financial planning, but there must also be other goals. Maybe you've got a goal that you want to take your family on a holiday. Well, we need to be able to put money aside for that sort of thing. And those are just, it's just a typical type of goal that one would have alongside things like emergency funds and retirement planning and tertiary education, those sorts of things.
Naomi, I'm hearing some discussions here about, don't panic, this too shall pass. And there's a lot of noise going on around at the moment, and it's hard to be positive because of the noise. So what are some of the things that we can do as consumers to not panic and try and take a longer term view?
Sure. Kirsty mentioned something really important around, the fact that it's not about timing the market, it's about time in the market. And what makes it really difficult to actually stay and spend that time in the market is that when you're seeing these negative headlines, it can send your emotions completely haywire. So there's a few things we can do. I think the first one is to just acknowledge your emotions and to take stock about how you're feeling emotionally and potentially as well as physically, because, the pandemic changed a lot of our freedoms. And so really take stock of where you are. And then the second one is to tap into investment truths if you're invested, or find information that you can trust. And so if you are an investor that's speaking to your investment manager or your financial planner, and then thirdly, I think it's about making sure you can give time and space to any decision you're going to make. I think our long-term goals are far in the future, and decisions that impact them shouldn't feel like an emergency. And so if you're feeling like you need to take an action quite quickly, it's important to just take a step back. And then lastly, it's about reviewing your long-term goals, because it may not seem like it now, but your retirement still matters. And so you need to review your long-term goals and what it is you still need to be doing now in order to make sure that you can achieve them. You might need to change some things because your circumstances might have changed, and that's okay. You might need to review maybe how much you're investing, etc. But really, a financial planner can really help you make those adjustments when necessary. And then the important thing is, once things settle, or it feels as if your circumstances are back to where they were previously, to make sure that you can then revisit those long-term goals and go back to what you were doing before, in order to make sure that you continue to be on track.
Priya, in your introduction, you said you are fascinated with the human side of this and the psychology of it. So any words of wisdom from that viewpoint for us too, to help people just take a deep breath and not panic?
So I'll marry the last two questions together a little bit. I think often we think of financial planning as individuals. We think of it as a wealthy person's problem or wealthy person's prerogative. And then the second thing we think is that it is all about deprivation. So someone's going to try to sell me a product and I'm going to have to pay money that I don't have. And neither of those things are true. Financial planning is for absolutely everybody, especially if you're earning an income quite actively. And financial planning, I always think, is about designing a life. So it's about designing the best possible life that you could live. And money is just the tool that you use to be able to enable that. And so, David, you said earlier on that it was about living, which I agree with. It's about living that best possible life now, but in a way that doesn't constrain your mindset. So you don't want to live a scarcity mindset. You want to have an abundance and a growth mindset. So don't penny pinch. It's not about penny pinching and saving every possible rand. It's about deciding what's important to you and designing that best life. Then at the same time, designing what your future life and your future self needs to enjoy. I think one of the constructs that we battle with is it is very easy for us to understand the gratification we'll have now, and we don't connect with the Priya of 10 years from now, or the David of 15 years from now, or as Francois said, when we're at retirement, we think, that old guy or old girl doesn't really exist. But it's really about connecting with the future self and the future life you'd like to live, and how you apportion that and make sure it becomes a reality as well. So the first thing I'd say is make sure that you create a financial plan. It's all about designing your life. And then marrying that question around a financial advisor, we see an advisor as being a financial coach, because there is no one answer. There is no silver bullet that an advisor will give you. They're there to marry the big picture, understanding the products, the tax environment, the macroeconomic landscape, and making that big picture my picture for each person, for each client. So that's what an advisor does, understands who you are, marries that to the bigger picture concepts, and creates something that's unique for each person.
I think that's going to be the outtake of the evening, that financial planning and advice is for everyone. And it's not about deprivation, it's about design. Naomi, I see you want to come in on this, and then Gerald, I'm going to bring you into.
I just wanted to add on a point that Priya mentioned around this idea of not being able to connect to our future self. And really, research shows that we actually see that person as a complete stranger, which makes it hard to give money away to a stranger. And one of the concepts that we often try to make people aware of is, if you're looking at your bank statement, if you're someone that's earning an income, that your money shouldn't only be going to the present. And so is there money that you're earning that is also being allocated to that future self?
That's brilliant too. Your future self is not a stranger. It's somebody that you are going to meet. And you want to make sure that that person's happy when you meet them, right? Gerald, I think some of the things, and before I start asking everyone for a closing statement, what I'd like to talk to you about is, we've discussed that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Things are coming out. Maybe we've had some dips in our investments, but they're coming back on now. So how do I start piecing my plan together again? So maybe I've had a blip, maybe I've had a bump in the road. What are the things I need to be thinking about as I start rebuilding my plan and moving again towards the present and the future? Okay, I think we have a lost Gerald due to some internet connectivity, so I'm going to open up and see.
What I'm saying is, at the moment, we've reached a point where everybody's talking about money again. And the one thing which is giving us hope is that everybody has thought about their situation and knowledge about money and realized we all thought we knew more than we did. And we're starting to have those conversations with people who know a little bit more than us about money and finances. And that's the rebuilding platform we need. We need to start having conversations with people who can help us to piece together the budget, to piece together the building blocks of money again. We have people who've lost their jobs, who've suddenly come into lump sums, and they're wondering, what do I do next? COVID has also created new opportunities for people to invest as well as make money. The whole digital economy has now opened up, and a lot of people who thought it was the end of the world are making more money than they were making this time last year because they've repositioned themselves. I know people who've repurposed their fancy vehicles for delivery. I know people who are now suddenly realizing that there's an entire new opportunities which have come out of this pandemic. But perhaps the best thing about money now is that we've sat as families. Lockdown forced everybody who had a family around them to get to know them again. And because of us being able to engage with those around us, we suddenly are able to start discussing money again. And I think that perhaps is my outtake of Money Smart Week, to say, look, Smart Money Week is about saying we now have a platform to talk with our spouses, with our children about money. Everyone now is topical about money right now. And I think I'll say, start trusting someone around your money. I've met widows, I've met financial advisors and planners who thought they'd never see a death claim come their way. And normally for a financial planning professional, it takes years before you get your first death, because normally you work with people your own age. But now a lot of people have come eye to eye with the advice they gave. And that's where I would also encourage people to work with people of integrity with a code of ethics like financial planning professionals, because we're held and bound by a code of conduct on the advice you give. Suddenly, you now have a situation where a widow calls you and says, my husband is gone. Did we plan enough? And suddenly, those calculations come again. So all of us professionals in this room are now suddenly important again in people's lives. And I would like to just encourage all South Africans to get someone to talk about money again and just have that conversation, because the situation we're in is just the beginning of a new journey for a lot of people.
Gerald, thank you. And you've actually given us a nice segue into what I'm going to ask each of you as a closing comment. And Money Smart Week South Africa has been running from the 22nd of March, running to the 28th of March. But we've done that specifically to connect with Global Money Week, which is also about the youth. And your segue saying, find someone to trust to talk about money. So if I was able to put my brains to some other use other than financial and invent a time machine and send you back to talk, not to your future self, but to your past self, what one piece of guidance would you sit down and say, this is what I've learned and this is what I'd like you to know from what I've learned? So think about when you were 18, what would you like to go back and tell your 18-year-old self? And Francois, you've been quiet for a bit, so I'm going to kick off with you with your closing comments.
Thanks a lot, David. That conversation with my 18-year-old self would be quite an interesting conversation. I think we'd start off by talking about healthy lifestyle and respecting and looking after the body that you're going to hand over to me in a couple of years' time. So that would be my starting point. And there'd be a lot of wisdom that I'd share with my 18-year-old self in terms of the physical body. But I think one of the other important things for me would be, I would have loved to have known about somebody like Warren Buffett, for example. I'd never heard of Warren Buffett and part of his story until quite recently. And one of the things that Buffett kind of talks about that I would share with my 18-year-old self is he started his first investment at the age of 11. He bought 3 shares at the age of 11. He sold them a couple of years later. And he often says that one of his big regrets is the fact that he didn't start investing earlier. So that's definitely a big pearl of wisdom that I'd want to share with my 18-year-old self. The other thing is something that my mother told me that I never really took note of, because I mean, 18-year-olds, what do your parents know anyway? My mother kind of said to me, study for as long as you want to. Don't be in a hurry to go and work. I'll pay for as much of the studies as I potentially can. And I didn't spend enough time investing in my ability to earn an income. So I needed to spend a bit more time studying, a bit more time building up my experience, a bit more time moving across different sectors, different jobs, different experiences, so that my earning ability can take me, into the future, into the space where I kind of want to be and where I need to be. Thanks, David.
Thanks. So I'm hearing start early and don't only invest in stocks and shares, but invest in yourself, invest in your own intellectual capital. Priya, going back to your 18-year-old self, what would you say?
I miss your body, firstly. But yeah, financially, I think it's a bit of a triad for me. I think the first one I would say is money is neither good nor bad. It is a reflection of your behavior and your mindset. And so if you treat yourself with love and respect, treat your money and treat your financial planning with the equal amount of integrity and respect. I think the second one for me that is huge is take care of the assets you have as early as possible. And I see two big assets that we don't deem assets, being time and ability to earn an income. So time is absolutely an asset. It's as good as having money in the bank. So if you haven't started taking action yet, start now, because it's not important that you start big. It's important that you start immediately, as early as possible. And the other one, obviously, being protect what you have, your body, your ability to earn an income is an absolute asset that we don't realize. And the final part of that triad is to say, when you know better, do better. You don't have to be your parents. You don't have to be the people around you that may have set some troubling examples. I had parents who were polar opposites in their money mindset. And so, when you know better and you have better access to information, do better, seek out the expertise you need. It's there.
So there I'm hearing, again, look after your body, look after your mind, but also look after your education, and don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to reach out to people who can help you. Naomi, your turn. What would you go back and tell yourself?
So two things. I think the one picks up from Priya's comment about time. I think, the younger you are, and if you have time, it really is free. And it's one of the biggest levers you can have for growing your money. I didn't necessarily understand the impact of interest, both from a saving perspective, in that I can earn interest, and then from a debt perspective, in that I can end up paying a lot of interest. And so I think understand the concept of interest, compound interest, as well as the impact of time and I think that's going to help you make more considered decisions about how you allocate the money that you do earn when you start. And then the second one is around talking to your family about money. I think it's something that can feel a bit of a taboo subject. And Old Mutual actually does some incredible research every year. And one of the things it shows is that, many South Africans are part of what's called the sandwich generation. And so, many people coming into the workforce and finding themselves supporting a wide range of family across generations, and this can be incredibly overwhelming. And so you need to find a way to be very comfortable to talk to your family about money, so you can make sure that both your own needs and your family's needs are catered for from a short-term and long-term perspective as well.
Gerald, your turn.
If I had to talk to my 18-year-old self, I would basically have tried to marry my wife 12 years earlier. And why am I saying that? It's because with COVID, you've suddenly realized the power of the couple. And you also started to, as a financial planner, I've also seen what divorce does to relationships. One of my jobs as a financial planning professional is marriage counselor or divorce counselor, because I've seen what can happen when financial planning goes wrong or when couples are not united in their financial planning. So what I would say is, to my younger self, is probably find the woman such as the one I have sooner and have children earlier, because you also suddenly realize that time is your enemy, Nomi, as well. When you leave it too long to have children, lugging around, chasing young children in the middle of COVID when you're fearful. So I would say, to my younger self, choose your relationships wisely and, plan your life sooner. It doesn't just happen. A good life is a planned life, and a planned life would have been, had I known what I know now in terms of studying for my profession at 18, I'd probably be employing all of you. That's my list.
Thanks, Gerald. And Kirsty, we're going to end where we began, and it's your turn to share your 18-year-old self's knowledge.
Absolutely, David. David, if I could wish on anything for myself as an 18-year-old, would have been to meet with a really good certified financial planner professional who would help me and guide me with my retirement savings in particular to start. Because if I had started with retirement savings at 15% of what I was earning as a young 20-odd-year-old, I would be able to retire with an income of 80% of my final salary. So that is my words. I wish I'd been able to start saving at an earlier age for retirement with a reasonable amount of money.
So all that's left now is for me to say to you as the panel, thank you so much for sharing your words of wisdom, your guidance, with the audience tonight. One of the fun things I find about doing sessions like this is, although I've been in the profession and the industry for 20 odd years, I learned something out of all of these. So I learned something from every single one of you today. And I think in summary, what I want to say is, financial planning and advice, investing, saving, it is for everyone, particularly if you're earning an income. Don't think that I'm not there. In fact, I've seen practices where teachers retire better off than millionaires because the teachers have that mindset of, I'm going to put away something. I'm going to look after my tomorrow. But it's not about deprivation. It's about design. So design your tomorrow and make sure that you can still live today. And yes, time is your friend when it comes to investing. It definitely is. The sooner you start, the better off you're going to be. But don't forget to invest in yourself. Don't forget that your earning potential, your intellectual capital is what's going to allow you to earn the money that is going to allow you to do the things that you want to do. So don't ever forget about yourself and investing in yourself. So I want to say thank you very much to everyone who joined us and listened to us, and to the panel. Some really, really excellent discussions and thoughts. And thank you so much for coming up and giving your time to share with South Africa. And then in the last one, don't forget, Money Smart Week has only just begun. So for everyone listening, carry on visiting the website. There are still literally tens and hundreds of sessions that are going to be taking place. Find one, educate yourself, start that investment in your own knowledge now through Money Smart Week South Africa. Thank you very much, and good evening. And if you're watching the recording, good morning, good afternoon, and good night too.
We have come to the end of yet another day of Money Smart Week. Thank you all for joining us on this jam-packed day.
And a jam-packed day it certainly was. We look forward to seeing you all again tomorrow, right here, same time, same place. Remember that this website is data-free and you won't be charged for accessing the videos or the streams on the site. All the videos will be made available for you to view at the end of Money Smart Week.
We cannot wait to have you all again tomorrow. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. This has been Money Smart Week 2021 Day 2. See you all tomorrow.
Money Smart Week South Africa 2021. The importance of being financially savvy cannot be underestimated. MWSA 2021 is taking place virtually and will consist of a host of online events throughout the week, all of which will be live streamed on MSWSA.co.za. Learn from the experts. Make better informed financial decisions.